this is the update that I have been waiting for. Trying to perfect my skirt making, in which where I create a skirt and I don't get a zip bulge and the skirt fits me perfectly. You guys, this is it, okay? This is the pattern drafting of how to use the hip allocation method to get the perfect fit for your skirt. Now, I did not know that the hip allocation method was the perfect way to, create a pattern that fits you properly. I just saw one of those videos on YouTube. I'm like, okay, the hip contour, the butt contour. I was like, okay, let me watch and learn this their contour thing and leave it to me to watch and try and get it right. Okay, so I am here to share the easiest method I actually followed in creating my own hip allocation skirt. Let's dive into it.
I actually really don't know why I have been longing for this video. Okay, I have been longing to make this particular pattern because since I've been seeing it on YouTube, that's the hip allocation pattern of making a skirt. I've been wanting to do it, and yeah, the day is here and we're about to do it. So before we get into it, please grab your pattern paper and we're just going to get into the pattern. But before then, there are some things that I need to talk to you guys about, and it is all the necessary steps that we need to take. Okay, for the hip allocation, the necessary step we need to take. Now, the first thing we all need to know are the measurements, right? I have gone ahead to name out the measurements, but then let's talk about how we're going to be breaking it down on the pattern. So please, whatever I'm doing right now, just go ahead and do them too. Like, grab a book and then make sure you do all this before we go straight into marking it on the pattern. Okay, it's going to make the work easier. So we know that the measurements that we need is the waist. That's the point. All the points we need is, first of all, we need a waist, and then we need the hip points, and we need the knee points. That's if you're making a skirt that is going to get to your knee, you need a knee point, and also the length of the skirt. Okay, now these are the points that we need, and once you have your points, the next thing we need to know are the round measurements. And since we have the waist, the hip, the knee point, and the length, it means that these points that we have here, we need the round measurement of it. So we need the round waist, we need the round hip, we need a round knee, and we need a round base, which is the round length. Okay, the round of the length. Okay, round base. So we all know that all our round measurements is divided by 4. So please know that. And in case you've not seen the previous video where I created a skirt and I explained all this, the measurements, everything you need to know about drafting out a skirt with all the measurements, please go see it. Or just watch the whole series. The whole series includes everything you need to know about skirts, the basic bodies, applying that, all those things. Okay, please go watch it. Make sure you watch it before you watch this one, okay, so you can understand everything that I am doing. Okay, now the main purpose why I need us to break this measurement on the book before marking on the pattern is because of what we're going to be doing on the pattern for the hip allocation. Okay, and when we are doing the hip allocation, the difference between this one, that's the hip allocation, and the one we do the normal pattern we draft for skirts, is what we mark on the hip. Okay, and how we mark it. And I want you guys to notice something. Now on the front pattern, when we're marking the hip, what we're going to be doing is we're going to divide the round hip. Okay, we divide the round hip by 4 minus 0.5 inch. That is what we're going to be doing on the front pattern. Now while we're marking it on the front pattern, I'm still going to tell you guys. Okay, so this is like a practical for me too. This is like my first time, so do not feel like, okay, she has done it before and she knows. No, I watched the video and I feel like I understand the steps. Okay, so trust the process. So example of what I just said now, the round hip divided by 4 minus 0.5 is, my round hip is 42. So 42 divided by 4 gives you 10.5. And I'm going to be minusing 0.5 inch from 10.5. So what I'll be marking on my front pattern, that's on the hip, is 10 inches. Hope you understand. When we're drafting out the back pattern, what we're going to be doing differently on the hip is we're going to divide the round hip by 4 plus 0.5. Now you see it. On the front, we took off 0.5. On the back, we're going to be adding back that 0.5. Okay, so now my round hip is 42. This is an example. My round hip is 42. So 42 divided by 4 gives you 10.5 plus 0.5 inch. So what I'll be marking on my back pattern is 11 inches. I hope you get this now. So this is what we're going to be doing on the patterns that makes the hip allocation possible. Okay, so please take note of what I just said and make sure you break it down just the same way I just did, like your front and your back, and let's just go into marking out the measurements on the pattern so you understand exactly what we're doing. Okay. This is my pattern paper. So the first thing that you need to do, like the first thing you need to do before we start marking the body measurements, is know the width and the length of your pattern. So before you start marking, you should know that when cutting out your pattern or your fabric to mark your measurements, your pattern should be as wide as using the biggest part of your body that you're working with, biggest measurements, divide that by 4 and plus 2 to 3 inches allowance. Okay, and that should determine the wideness of your pattern. If your biggest measurement is 40, you divide that measurement by 4 and then you add 3 to 4 inches allowance, and then that should be the width of your pattern. As for the length, you're just going to know how long you want your outfit or your skirt or whatever you're marking to be, and you go ahead and add 3 to 4 inches allowance to that so you're safe, and that should be the length of your pattern. Okay, and for those that don't understand how we are dividing by 4 and what it means to divide by 4 or 2 or 3 or whatever I'm saying, like, this particular series is packed with information. So if you start from the beginning and you watch, there is no way you will not understand sewing and the terms and the division that we're doing. Okay, no matter who you are, you're going to understand. So just watch from the beginning of the series. So I have my pattern paper here, and my width here is my round hip divided by 4 because that is the highest measurement I'm working with, the biggest. So I divided by 4 and I added 2 inches to that. That is the extra I'm adding. And for the length, I added 4 inches to that. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing first on my pattern paper is mark a starting line, and that is going to be 1 inch down. So 1 inch down is my starting line. 1 inch down here is going to be my starting line. You can see that I'm placing my tape from the top of the pattern, the edge, and I'm coming down by 1 inch, and that is my starting line. Now, like I said while we were dividing, this pattern here is for the front. So this is my front pattern. Let me indicate that this is my front. Okay, and this line here is going to be my starting line and where my waist measurement will be sitting. Okay, so this is my center front line. Okay, so here is my center front, and this is where it's going to be on fold when I'm cutting on the fabric. Okay, so now that we have the starting line, which is the waist, the next thing we're going to do is mark the hip points. Okay, I'm going to be marking my hip points. So I'm going to be marking 9 inches down from the waist as my hip point. Okay, so this is 9, and I'm marking it. See my tape here going down by 9, and this is my hip point. So here is my hip. Please make sure you're doing this accordingly, okay? As I'm doing it, you're doing it the same. Now the next thing I'm going to mark is my waist to my knee point. Remember I said my knee point is 20 inches, okay? So I'm going to be marking 20 inches down from my waist. All I have to do is place my tape from the waist here, the starting line, and I'll mark 20 inches down. So the next is the length of the skirt, and the length of the skirt for me is going to be 33 because this is not a short skirt or a knee length skirt. This is a midi skirt, like almost full skirt but not full. I'm just going to mark 33 as the length, okay, a midi skirt. So 33 is how long my skirt is going to be. So here is my knee point, and here is the length. Okay, so this is the length. So you can see that we have 4 points on the skirt, and you should have 4 points on your pattern too. Okay, we have the waist, the first point, we have the hip, we have the knee point, and we have the length. Please make sure you have this. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to divide my round waist by 4, and I'll mark this down on my waist point, and also add 1 inch for my dart. Okay, so we have gotten to the point where we divide round measurements by 4, and the first is the waist. So I'll divide my round waist by 4. My round waist is 30 divided by 4 is 7.5, plus 1 inch gives you 8.5. So I'll be marking 8.5 on the waistline. Okay, so this is 8.5, my round waist plus my dart. On the hip line, I'll go ahead and mark what we did on the book. Okay, what I did on my book, where I divided my round hip by 4 and minus 0.5. Let me do it again. My round hip is 42 divided by 4 gives you 10.5. Now if you doubt me, use your calculator. Okay, so divided by 4 gives you 10.5 minus 0.5. What I'll be marking on my hip is 10 inches. So you can see this is 10, and I'm marking 10 inches in. So this is my hip. I'll go ahead and connect my waist to my hip. Now normally you're supposed to do this with a curve ruler, but I don't have one right here. Okay, the curve I have is not going to get. Okay, so yeah, if you have a curve ruler, it is best you do that, use your curve ruler. But yeah, I'm going to connect like this, my hip to my waist. On my knee line, this is my knee line, what I will be marking is I'm going to be minusing 2 inches from what I marked on the hip. Okay, I marked 10 inches on the hip, right? And I'm going to be minusing 2 inches. So what I mean is, what I marked here on my hip is 10, right? 10 inches. That is from my round hip divided by 4 minus 0.5. What I'm going to do here on the knee point is minus 2 inches from this. Okay, 10 minus 2 gives us 8 inches, and 8 inches is what I'm going to be marking on my knee. Okay, I'm going to mark 8 inches from the center front here. In from the center front, I placed my tape and I'm going in by 8 inches. Okay, and I'm going to connect from my hip to my knee. All right, so like I said, if you have a curve ruler, this will be best done with a curve ruler. But yeah, I'm improvising. I don't have a curve ruler, so I'm just improvising. I'll be improvising. So if you don't have a ruler self, you can use your hand and just make dot 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 dots. You get to the point where you want to connect. So now that I have 8 inches here, and that is like from my hip measurement minus 2 inches. Okay, that's what I marked on my knee. I'm going to come down to the length. Okay, on the length, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to minus 3 inches, not 2 this time around. Remember, on the knee I minus 2 inches and I marked it here on the knee. But then on my length, I'm going to be minusing 3 from the 10 inches I have here. Okay, so on the hip I have 10 inches, and on the length I'm going to say 10 minus 3 inches. So I'm going to be marking 7 inches on the length. Okay, so what I'm marking on the length, or on my base, which is the length, is 10 inches minus 3 inches, which is 7. So yeah, that's what I'm marking here, 7. And now I'm just going to connect the 7 to my knee. All right, let me use my longer ruler. I hope you got all the steps. So yeah, we're done. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add my allowance, which is I'm going to be adding half an inch on the top from the waist to this point. But here on the base, I'm going to be adding like 1 inch. But before I add the 1 inch, I'm going to be folding the pattern before adding the 1 inch. Okay, so let me just go ahead and mark my allowances. Make sure you always adjust your hip here. It's necessary for you to always adjust it so you don't have ears. Okay, so what I adjusted is not more than a quarter an inch. I'm just going to mark half an inch from there so I can connect. For the length, 1 inch. So I'm going to mark 1 inch on the length as my allowance. But before I cut, I'm just going to fold this from the length. I'm folding from the length. Okay. So you can see that I folded in this so that I have the, see what happens here, right? because this is going to be the hemming allowance. So you see I folded it in from the length, and now it gives it this kind of flay, so that whenever I cut and I'm sewing it back and I want to hem this back, I don't get any discomfort from this side. Okay, so you fold it from the length and then before you cut out. Okay, so you can see, and now I can go ahead and cut the rest out. On the waist, I said I was going to be adding half an inch. It's going to be for when I decide to sew my band. I have allowances there. Okay, I don't sew into my measurements. Now this is my 0.5, right? Now we can mark the dart. Now for the dart, what I will do for the front pattern is I'm going to mark on the waist here. I'll place my tape and mark my nipples to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 8 divided by 2 gives you 4. So I'll mark 4 here on the waistline. On my hip, I'll place my tape on my hip and I'll mark 4 inches upwards. Okay, you either do that or you can place your tape from the waist to the hip and then find the middle point and mark your dart. Whichever you want to do is going to give you the proper and the good fitting that you want. Okay, so you can mark 3 inches upwards, you can mark whichever you want to. Okay, so let me just go ahead and mark 3 inches upwards, but before then I'll be marking 4 inches here, my nipples to nipple divided by 2, and then from there I go up by 3 inches. Okay, so I'll connect this to this. This gives it, automatically gives it a straight line. Okay, so now I'm going to take my dart of 0.5 on each side of this line. Okay, this is the apex line. I'll mark 0.5 to the side, 0.5 to the side, and this will give us the perfect dart intake. Okay, for the skirt. So half an inch here and half an inch here. Okay, and then connect it here. So here goes the dart. So this is the dart, and yeah, 3 inches upward from the hip. Okay, so I hope you were able to understand how we got and arrived to this. And this is the front pattern. Very simple, very easy. Here is the side. Okay, and here is the center front. So yeah, and we added 0.5 as the allowances round the pattern. So let's go ahead and cut out this excess. And I am meant to drop the front waistline by 1.5. Okay, so here is my line for my front waistline. Please do not mistake it. This is the line, this is the allowance we added. So what I'll be doing is I'm going to be dropping my front waistline by 1.5 inches. So since I already have my allowance here, I'm just going to place my tape there and mark 1.5 down. Okay, so this from the allowance, I'm marking 1.5. This is the center front. Now this is necessary so that we don't have those bulge. You know that bulge on when you make skirts and you have those bulge lines. I'm eliminating that by marking 1.5. Okay, this is 1.5. Okay, now I'm just going to take my ruler and connect this to this. Okay, I was supposed to do this before adding allowance, but oh well, we're at this point and I know it's not going to affect anything, so I'm just going to connect here to this point. Okay, you can see that I did not start from the edge. I came in a little bit by 0.5 before I connected down to the 1.5 inch here. This is 1.5 inch drop. Okay, in case you don't understand, that's the drop. we made the drop. Okay, I'm just going to cut it out. Now I wasn't going to do it because I thought I was going to be using the front to draft the back, but then again I want you guys to really understand the hip allocation, so we're going to be drafting the back individually on its own. So I'm just going to be marking 2 inches in as the allowance for the zip before we start marking our necessary measurements. Okay, so this is 2 inches from the edge here. I'm marking 2 inches. So here is 2 inches. Please make sure you do exactly what I just did. Cut out like, or just mark out 2 inches, and we're going to be using that later. Okay, please make sure you do just that. Okay. Okay, so once we have all the points, please make sure you know all the points. I know this is the second pattern, which is the back, but make sure you have all your points: your waist, your hip, your knee, and your length. Nothing, and your length. Okay, so make sure you have all these points indicated, and remember the 2 inches here for the zip. Okay, so once we have all that done, the next thing we're going to do is on the waist. That's the first thing we're going to be doing. On the waist, we're going to be coming in by 1 inch. So I'll mark 1 inch in. Now this has nothing to do with the measurements, the body measurements yet. We're just trying to eliminate any fold that is going to be happening at the back. You guys, you know, when we make skirts, especially the last skirt I made, I'm going to be honest, I did not like the fact that I had like a little fold, and it made me so uncomfortable. Like, that is why I wanted to actually try out this pattern. So mark the 1 inch with me. Let me use a green marker. Okay, let me use a black marker, and then I'll use a green marker to add the allowance. Okay, so come in here by 1 inch and connect that 1 inch to the hip. So like I said, all these things we're doing actually needs us to use a curve ruler, but I don't have a curve ruler and I can't wait. Okay, so I'm gonna do this. Okay, so this here is the 1 inch. So we came in here by 1 inch. 1 inch, not inches, 1 inch. And that this is our new waistline. So now we have this 1 inch. The next thing we're going to do, it means that here is cancelled, right? But then we're going to be adding our zip allowance from here. Okay, so what we're going to be doing now is I will divide my round waist by 4 plus 1 inch for that, and I'll mark it from this point in. Okay, I'm going to divide my round waist by 4 and add 1 inch allowance, as in 1 inch for the dart, and I'm going to be marking it from this one here in, no longer this line in. So my round waist divided by 4 is 7.5 plus 1 gives you 8.5. Okay, so this is my waist point here, right? Now that I have my waist point here, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be marking 11 inches on my hip. And how did I get 11 inches? I'm supposed to mark 10.5, but remember what I said on my book while we were marking. I divided my round hip by 4, okay, plus 0.5. The 0.5 we took away from the front. We're going to be adding it back here. So this is 10.5 plus 0.5 equals to 11, and I'm going to be marking 11 inches from here in. So 11 inches is the last part of my pattern. I don't know how that happened. That means I'm not going to be able to add allowance to this pattern, but you should if you have the opportunity, okay? So I'm going to connect my 11 inches to my waist. So this is my 11 inches, and I've connected that to my waist. Make sure you have excess pattern on this side so you can add your allowance. As for me, I made a mistake, and this whole pattern here from here to here is 11. And now on the knee point, I hope you guys understood what we just did here. Okay, hope you understand. Now on the knee point, remember what we did on the front pattern, right? We took away 2 inches, right? What we're going to be doing on the back pattern is that particular 2 inches we took away. We're not going to be taking it away like that on this knee point. What we're going to do is on the center back here, this is the center back, I am going to come in by 1 inch. See, I'm placing my tape on this line and I'm marking 1 inch in. Okay, now I'll connect this 1 inch to this point using my long ruler. From my hip to my knee, I'm connecting that. Okay, and from this point here, I'm going to mark what I get from minusing from my hip, 2 inches from my hip. Let me say that again. What I marked on my hip is 11, and I'm going to be minusing 2 inches from 11. Okay, 2 inches. 11 minus 2. So what I'm supposed to mark on my knee is 9 inches. Remember, we did the same thing on the front. Okay, we minus 2 inches from the side, but for here we are going to be doing that like this. We've taken away 1 inch from here, and from this point here we're going to be marking the 9 inches in. Okay, so which means that we've taken 1 inch out from here, and we're going to take out the next 1 inch from this side. So I'll mark the 9 inches from here in. And I'll connect. Just know that you're minusing 2 inches from your back hip, just as you did on your front. This is 1 inch here, 1 inch from this line before you mark what you're getting, okay? And we're going to do the same thing for the length, okay? On the length, I'm going to come in here by 1.5 and then mark the rest in, okay? So I'm going to mark 1.5 inch in from here, okay? Right, this is 1.5. I'm going to mark it 1.5, and I'm going to mark the rest, which is my hip minus 3. 11 inches is my hip minus 3. I don't know why I keep doing divide. Minus 3 equals to 8 inches. So I'm marking 8 inches in. Now I'm going to connect this to this, my nail. Okay, so here is what we have. And once we have that, let me use my green marker Once we have this, you guys, you know that I want you to understand this thing, right? I don't want you to have any hiccup, okay? If you have any question, please ask me, okay? How we got to this point, ask me. I'm willing to answer, I'm ready to answer, okay? Please ask me. Let me adjust this. Always adjust your hip line so you don't have ears when you sew. So please always make sure you ask me. If you get confused how we did this, let me know and I'm going to explain again. We're going to go ahead and add our zip allowance, which is 1 inch. So I'll be marking one inch like from here. This is the new line for the waist, right? So this is a new line. I'm going to go out by 1 inch following my curve. Okay, this is the curve. I'll follow this curve. I'll go out by 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch, and that is going to be for my zip. Okay, so this is my zip line. So this is the zip. Okay, this is zip, zip. All the green lines are my zip, and I marked just 1 inch. So now we're done with that. Let's go ahead and create the dart for the back. Okay, so I'm going to be marking my nipples to nipple, and I'm going to be marking my dart from that. Okay, so my nipple to nipple divided by 2 is 4. I'm going to mark that on the hip line. And okay, so I'm going to put my tape back on this line, on the actual line before. I'm going to put my tape there, okay, and mark my 4 inches so I get a straight line. Don't be confused. I placed my tape back on the actual line. Okay, this is the actual line before, and that's where I'm marking my 4 inches from. So you should do the same. So this is 4 here, and then I have my 4 here. I'll come up by 2 inches from the 4. Okay, and now I'll connect this point here to this point here to create my dart. So I get a straight dart. Okay, that's why I'm doing this. So I have a straight line. So now that I have this, I'm going to be marking ½ inch here, ½ inch here to mark my darts. Okay, so I'll mark 0.5 inch here and 0.5 inch here, and that creates my dart. So I'll connect this to this point, this to this point. And here goes my dart. So this is the dart. And I don't know if you guys had noticed, this is done, like we're done. Okay, so please let me know if you understood everything that we just did. And if you don't, also let me know. And I'm going to be, bringing it back for you. But yeah, let's go ahead and add our allowances. Now remember that you're supposed to add 0.5 on the side. Okay, for me I ran out of pattern, but I'm going to be attaching another pattern to do that so you don't get confused. But before then, I'll just add the ½ inch here, and then I'll work on the length and the hem. Okay, so I'm adding my ½ inch on the waist. This is my waist, so ½ inch up. Let me use the green marker. Okay. On the length, I'll mark 1 inch for the hem. Before I cut, I'm going to do what I did on the front. I'll fold this. Okay, I'm going to fold first. I'll fold from the length. So I'll fold from the length, and that is how I'm going to cut. Okay, so cutting from the length, I folded it in before I cut. Okay, I'm not going to cut that side yet. Let me cut out this side. So use this to add my allowance. Okay, so now I can add my 1/2 inch allowance. So please do not make the same mistake I made. Add my 1/2 inch. Following my black lines, I'm going to add the 1/2 inch allowance. So here is my 0.5, the green line. I was successful enough to add my allowance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this before I cut. Fold this like this before I cut. So this is what we have. Same thing we have on the length of the front pattern. And I'll cut this off. Okay, so this is my back pattern, and I'm so excited we got to the end of this video. I will be cutting this out and sewing this along with you guys. So this is the perfect, to me, this is like the perfect skirt pattern. That is, if it works, it's going to be like the perfect skirt pattern, and I can't wait to see how we create this and make this part of our collection in our wardrobes, okay, or for our clients. Okay, so I'll see you guys on the sewing video. I love you guys so much, and I'm excited for us to sew this pattern and see what the result looks like. So please do not forget to go watch the series if you are new, so you understand everything I've been doing and saying. Watch the series according to how I have uploaded them, and let me know what you think. And if you have any question, you can always comment on the comment section. I love you guys so much. Love and light. See you on my next video. Bye for now.